The gleaming metallic hull of the AN research vessel reflected Earth's sunlight like a mirror in space. Inside the ship's main research chamber, Chief Researcher Do-Won Lee frowned at his instruments. His long fingers, covered in pale blue scales, moved across the control panel with practiced ease. Something about this small blue planet wasn't making sense. "Chief, you need to see this," called out one of his junior researchers, pointing at a screen filled with dancing wavelengths. "These patterns keep appearing from the surface. They're unlike anything in our database." Do-Won moved closer, his tall frame casting a shadow over the display. The waves pulsed with a strange rhythm, almost like they were alive. He had studied thousands of planets during his career, but Earth was proving to be different. His species, the Aeon, prided themselves on their logical, emotion-controlled society. Their neural suppressors kept their minds clear and focused. Yet something about these waves made his scales tingle. Lieutenant Horin Park was the first to notice the changes. She had been monitoring the planet's northern hemisphere when she suddenly grabbed her head and stumbled. "Chief," she gasped, "something feels wrong. My mind. It feels strange." Do-Won had dismissed it as common space sickness, but then others started reporting similar symptoms. The ship's medical bay filled with crew members complaining of unusual sensations. Some felt an unexplained happiness, others a deep sadness. Their neural suppressors, technology that had worked perfectly for centuries, seemed to be malfunctioning. Do-Won ordered a full scan of the ship's systems, but everything checked out normal. "Perhaps we should observe the source directly," suggested Captain Sun Mi-Kang, her usually emotionless voice carrying the hint of curiosity. The captain rarely left the bridge, so her interest caught Do-Won's attention. They chose Seoul, a large human city, for their first close observation. Using their cloaking technology, they positioned the ship above an open area where thousands of humans had gathered. The sight was unusual enough. So many beings crowded together, all facing the same direction. But what happened next would change galactic history forever. The first notes of music floated up from the concert below. The effect on the Aeon crew was immediate and dramatic. Do-Won watched in amazement as Captain Kang's scales shifted from their normal blue to a bright purple, a color change that hadn't been seen in their species for generations. It indicated extreme emotional response. 5 other crew members showed similar reactions. Their neural suppressors, designed to block all emotional extremes, simply shut down. The ship's medical officer reported that their brain patterns had completely changed. Instead of their usual ordered waves, their minds were dancing in sync with the sounds from below. "What is happening to us?" whispered Horin, tears flowing from her eyes, something that had been engineered out of their species centuries ago. She wasn't in pain. Instead, she described feeling something they had no word for in their language. The closest translation might be beautiful sadness. The concert lasted 3 Earth hours, and during that time, the affected crew members experienced every emotion their ancestors had written about, but that modern Aeons had never felt. Joy, sorrow, excitement, longing. Feelings that had been considered primitive and dangerous were suddenly flooding through them. Captain Kang, who had commanded the ship for 20 years without ever showing a hint of emotion, spent the entire concert with her hands pressed against the viewing window, scales shifting through every color imaginable. When the music finally stopped, she turned to Do-Won with eyes that seemed to see the universe in a completely new way. "Chief Researcher," she said, her voice trembling, "we've discovered something far more powerful than any weapon or technology. These humans have found a way to control emotions without suppressors, without technology. They do it with nothing but sound waves arranged in patterns." Do-Won knew he should report this to the Aeon High Command immediately. This kind of emotional manipulation could be considered a threat to their way of life. But as he watched his crew members experiencing genuine feelings for the first time, he hesitated. The joy on their faces, the tears in their eyes, the way they moved to the remembered rhythms, none of it seemed dangerous. "Captain," he said finally, "I recommend we stay and study this phenomenon further." For scientific purposes, of course. Captain Kang's scales flickered with colors that suggested she knew his real reasons had nothing to do with science. Agreed, she said softly. These concerts clearly require more research. Many more observations will be necessary. As the Earth turned below them, Do-1 began composing his report to High Command. How could he explain that they had found a civilization that hadn't suppressed their emotions, but had instead turned them into something magnificent? How could he describe music to a species that had never truly heard it? He looked at his still-affected crew members, who were trying to recreate the sounds they had heard, and realized that everything was about to change. The Aeons had spent centuries trying to control emotions through technology. Humans had found a way to do it with nothing but pure sound, and in doing so, they hadn't suppressed emotions. They had transformed them into art. Professor Jae-ho Kim stared at the odd group of beings sitting in Seoul National University's main auditorium. Their blue scales gleamed under the lights, and their tall, slender forms made them look almost like standing lizards in laboratory coats. If someone had told him a month ago that he'd be teaching music to aliens, he would have laughed. Yet here they were. Dr. Yoo-jin Choi wheeled in the first set of instruments, her hands shaking slightly with excitement. They had spent days preparing for these experiments, but nothing could have truly prepared them for the reality of working with extraterrestrial beings. "We'll start with something simple," Jae-ho said, speaking slowly as the aliens' translation devices processed his words. "This is what we call a piano." He gestured to the grand piano on stage. The alien researchers leaned forward, their large eyes fixed on the instrument. Their leader, who had introduced himself as Do-1 Lee, held up a device that looked like a thin tablet. "Please proceed," he said in slightly mechanical Korean. Jae-ho sat at the piano and began to play Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The effect was immediate and stunning. The alien scales began to shift color, moving from blue to deep purple. Several of them gripped their seats, their long fingers turning white at the knuckles. "Are you all right?" Yoo-jin asked, concerned. "Should we stop?" "Please continue," Do-1 said, his voice trembling. "We are experiencing what you might call emotions. It is unexpected, but not unpleasant." Jae-ho continued playing, watching in amazement as the aliens' colors continued to change with each movement of the piece. Their devices were recording everything, but even their advanced technology seemed inadequate to capture what was happening to them. When the piece ended, Yoo-jin stepped forward with a violin. "Let's try something different," she suggested. She began playing a fast-paced folk song, and the alien scales instantly shifted to bright orange. Two of them stood up and began moving in a way that looked almost like dancing. "Remarkable," Jae-ho muttered, taking notes. Their physiological responses seemed to match the mood of each piece perfectly. The experiments continued throughout the day. They tried different instruments and genres, carefully documenting each response. Rock music turned their scales red and made them move energetically. Jazz caused swirling patterns of blue and green across their skin. When they played a sad ballad, the alien scales turned a deep blue, and several of them produced what looked like tears. "In our society," Do-1 explained during a break, "we use neural suppressors to control our emotions. We believe this was the path to advancement. But your music, it controls emotions in a way our technology never could. It doesn't just suppress them. It guides them, shapes them, creates them." The most dramatic moment came when they played a full orchestral piece. They had brought in a recording of the Seoul Philharmonic performing Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture. As the music swelled, the alien scales began cycling through colors so rapidly it was like watching a light show. Do-1 actually fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the experience. "The complexity," he gasped. "So many emotions at once. We never knew it was possible." Jae-ho and Yoo-jin exchanged glances. They had studied music their whole lives, but seeing its effect on these beings made them understand it in a completely new way. It wasn't just art or entertainment. It was a form of emotional communication more powerful than words. "We have a theory," Yu Jin said, showing them her preliminary findings. "The way your scales change color seems to match the frequency patterns of the music. It's as if your bodies are physically translating the sound into emotional responses." The aliens studied her data with great interest. "This could explain why our neural suppressors fail when exposed to your music," one of them said. "The sound bypasses our technological controls and speaks directly to our biological systems." As the day drew to a close, Jaiho sat down at the piano one last time. "This is a piece I composed," he said softly. "I've never played it for anyone before." His fingers touched the keys, and a gentle melody filled the room. He had written it after his mother passed away, trying to capture both his grief and his gratitude for her life. The aliens sat in complete silence, their scales shifting through subtle shades of blue and purple. When the last note faded away, Du-Won spoke in a voice full of wonder. "We thought we had evolved beyond emotions," he said. "Now we understand that we had simply forgotten how to feel them properly. Your music, it doesn't just create emotions, it gives them meaning." As Jaiho watched the aliens leave that evening, still discussing everything they had experienced, he realized that music had just become humanity's most important contribution to the galaxy, not as a weapon or a tool, but as a bridge between different forms of life and consciousness. "What do you think will happen now?" Yu Jin asked as they packed up their instruments. Jaiho smiled, looking at the notes they had taken. "I think," he said slowly, "we're about to see the greatest cultural exchange in human history." And it all started with a simple piano lesson. The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched up into darkness, its curved walls lined with thousands of seats occupied by representatives from across the known universe. In the center, standing on the speaker's platform, Mei Risong fought to keep her voice steady as hundreds of alien eyes focused on her. "Distinguished members of the council," she said, her words automatically translated into 50 different languages. "I stand before you today to defend humanity's oldest form of emotional expression." The platform slowly rotated, allowing her to address all sections of the vast chamber. Behind her, a holographic display showed scenes from Earth, concert halls, street musicians, children singing in schools. Another screen displayed the alarming reports that had brought them to this crisis. Alien populations experiencing uncontrolled emotional responses, work stoppages during musical broadcasts, even instances of mass gatherings that local authorities couldn't disperse. "The recording that caused a complete shutdown of the Centauri mining operation," growled Representative Cax, his crystalline form glowing red with anger, "was something you humans call rock music. 3,000 workers refused to return to their posts for 2 full cycles. They claimed they could no longer work under such conditions." Mireille nodded. "They were experiencing something we call protest. The music helped them express feelings they already had." "Exactly." Cax's crystal structure vibrated with intensity. "This is why human music must be classified as a weapon. It incites rebellion." The chamber erupted in overlapping voices and sounds. Some representatives flashed warning colors, others emitted defensive spores, and a few simply vibrated in distress. Mayra waited for the chamber's automatic damping field to restore order. "Yesterday," she continued when silence returned, "I visited the New Earth Music Academy on Proxima B. Would you like to see what I found?" Without waiting for permission, she activated a new hologram. The image showed alien children of various species sitting in a circle, some holding simple instruments. A human teacher sat with them, showing them how to create basic rhythms. The aliens' natural colors shifted in harmony as they played together. "This is not warfare," Mary said softly. "This is communication, understanding, growth." A representative from the Hive Collective buzzed forward. "We have reports of our drones developing individual preferences for different types of music. This threatens the very structure of our society." "Or perhaps," Myray suggested, "it offers your society new ways to evolve. Change doesn't have to be threatening." The debate continued for hours. Myray presented evidence of music's healing properties, showing how certain frequencies could calm aggressive species or help different races work together. But for every positive example, the opposition had a frightening counter. A single human love song caused a diplomatic incident in the Orient sector, declared one representative. Two previously hostile species began unauthorized peace talks after hearing it. Myray struggled not to smile at that one. Is peace now considered a threat? The council's senior elder, a being made of pure energy contained within an ancient environmental suit, moved forward. Representative Song, no one doubts that human music has power. That is precisely what concerns us. Your species has developed a way to directly influence the emotional states of other beings without their consent. With respect, Elder, Myray replied, all communication influences emotions. When you speak, your words affect how others feel. When you share ideas, you change how others think. Music is just another language, perhaps the most honest one we have. She gestured to the musicians waiting quietly at the back of the chamber. If you'll permit me, I would like to demonstrate something. After a moment's hesitation, the elder nodded. A small group of human musicians stepped forward. With them came representatives from 3 alien races who had been studying Earth music. Together, they began to play a piece specially composed for this moment, a blend of human melody and alien harmonics that filled the chamber with sound. Myray watched as the council members responded. Some shifted colors, others changed shapes, a few began to emit peaceful pheromones. But most importantly, they listened. When the music ended, she spoke into the silence. What you just felt wasn't mind control. It wasn't a weapon. It was connection. Different species coming together to create something new. If you classify music as a weapon, you won't be protecting your peoples. You'll be denying them a fundamental right. The right to feel, to express, to understand each other in ways that go beyond words. The elder's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. You make a compelling argument, Representative Song. But the power of human music cannot be ignored. Some form of control must be established. Myray nodded. We propose establishing an interstellar musical exchange program. Let us teach those who want to learn. Let us help your peoples understand and create their own music. Instead of fearing this power, let's share it. As the council moved into their private deliberation chamber, Myray studied the faces and forms around her. Some showed fear, others curiosity, and a few displayed what she had learned to recognize as hope. Whatever they decided, she knew that human music had already changed the galaxy forever. The only question was whether that change would bring walls or bridges. The Seoul Arts Center glowed softly in the evening light as the last audience members found their seats. Conductor Tae-young Baek adjusted his bow tie, peeking through the curtain at the packed concert hall. Tonight's performance of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony was sold out, with both humans and aliens filling the seats. No one noticed the dark shapes moving through the shadows outside. The Nexus warriors, with their gray skin and emotionless black eyes, slipped past security with military precision. Their neural blockers, far more advanced than the Aeon technology, kept them focused solely on their mission: capture the human sonic weapon. Inside, Tae-young raised his baton. The orchestra sat ready, their instruments gleaming under the stage lights. The first movement began, soft and mysterious, filling the hall with its gentle power. In the shadows of the upper balcony, a Nexus warrior paused, feeling an unfamiliar sensation in his chest. The music built slowly, layer upon layer of sound. More warriors took their positions, but something was wrong. Their movements, usually perfect and coordinated, began to falter. One of them touched his face, feeling moisture there for the first time in his life. The second movement started, and that's when they made their move. 20 warriors emerged from different points in the hall, their weapons raised. Screams erupted from the audience, but Tae-young didn't stop. He kept conducting, his movements even more passionate as chaos broke out around him. Keep playing, he called to his orchestra. The musicians, though terrified, trusted their conductor. The music swelled, filling every corner of the hall with its power. The lead warrior stepped onto the stage, his weapon aimed at Tai Young. "Stop this weapon," he demanded, his voice shaking slightly. But something strange was happening to him. His gray skin had begun to flush with color, and his black eyes were widening with an emotion he had never felt before. The third movement began, gentle and sweet. The warrior's weapon lowered slightly as the music washed over him. Other warriors around the hall were experiencing similar effects. One dropped his weapon entirely, sinking into an empty seat as tears began streaming down his face. Tai Young saw what was happening. He had witnessed the effect of music on aliens before, but never like this. The Nexus warriors, famous throughout the galaxy for their complete lack of emotion, were breaking down. Their neural blockers, designed to suppress all feelings, were powerless against Beethoven's masterpiece. As the fourth movement approached, the famous Ode to Joy, the leader of the warriors stumbled forward. What is happening to us?" he gasped. His perfect military posture crumbled as he fell to his knees beside the conductor's podium. The chorus stood, and their voices joined the orchestra. The effect was overwhelming. Warriors throughout the hall began to experience emotions their species had surgically and chemically suppressed for generations. Some laughed, others cried, and a few simply stood in wonder as colors and feelings flooded their consciousness. The audience, which had been frozen in fear, began to understand what they were witnessing. They watched as these feared warriors, known throughout the galaxy as emotionless killing machines, were transformed by the power of music. Tai Young conducted with everything he had, knowing that this performance might change the course of galactic history. The music reached its climax, the full power of orchestra and chorus, filling the space with joy, hope, and humanity's greatest message of brotherhood. The leader of the warriors rose slowly, tears streaming down his now colorful face. His neural blocker lay shattered on the ground, but he made no move to repair it. Instead, he turned to face his fellow warriors, who were all experiencing similar transformations. As the final notes of the symphony faded away, silence fell over the hall. Then, something unprecedented happened. The warrior leader walked to the center of the stage and began to sing. It was rough and untrained, but it was the first time in recorded history that a Nexus had ever produced music. One by one, other warriors joined in, creating a strange but beautiful harmony. The audience sat in stunned silence as these beings, who had come to steal music as a weapon, instead discovered it as a gift. "We were wrong," the leader said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "This is not a weapon. It is liberation." News of what happened spread quickly across the galaxy. The Nexus warriors refused to return to their emotionless state. Instead, they became the strongest advocates for human music, testifying before the Galactic Council about how it had freed them from centuries of emotional imprisonment. Tai Young kept the baton from that night, displaying it in his office alongside a piece of the broken neural blocker. Sometimes, when young musicians asked him about the importance of music, he would point to these items and tell them about the night when music didn't just move people, it transformed them. The Seoul Philharmonic Orchestra's performance became known as the Liberation Symphony, and it was remembered as the moment when the galaxy finally understood that human music wasn't a weapon to be feared, but a gift to be shared. The Nexus warriors who came to steal it instead became its most powerful protectors, their own transformation serving as living proof of music's true power. In a dimly lit basement on the mining world of Kepler 186f, dozens of alien workers huddled around a small holographic projector. The air was thick with various species stress pheromones, but all eyes were fixed on the floating image of Daehyun Park's quartet. The sound of his saxophone, blended with traditional Earth jazz and alien tonal frequencies, filled the hidden space. "Turn it down," hissed a lookout near the entrance. "The overseers are making their rounds." But no one moved to lower the volume. They were too entranced by the music, a revolutionary mix of human jazz and the natural harmonics of 5 different alien species. Da-hyun had created something entirely new, a form of music that spoke to everyone who heard it. In the recording, Da-hyun's saxophone wove around the crystalline tones of his Centaurian bassist, while the atmospheric pulses of their Neptunian drummer created rhythms that seemed to bypass the conscious mind. The 4th member of the quartet, a being of pure energy, added waves of emotional resonance that turned the music into something more than just sound. On another planet, 3 systems away, Nayoung Lee sat cross-legged on the floor of a makeshift classroom. Around her, a group of young aliens struggled with simple Earth instruments modified for their unique anatomies. "Don't think about the notes," she told them, her words translated into their various languages. "Think about what you feel. Music isn't about playing the right sounds. It's about expressing what's inside you." A young Nexus, one of many who had abandoned their emotional suppression after the famous Seoul concert, raised his hand. "But we were taught that feelings are dangerous, that they lead to chaos." Nayoung smiled and picked up her violin. "Let me show you something," she said, and began to play. The melody was simple but full of emotion. One by one, the alien students began to join in, adding their own sounds to the music. What emerged was beautifully imperfect, a raw, honest expression of their collective feelings. Back in the underground club, the workers watched as Da-hyun's quartet reached the climax of their performance. The music spoke of struggle, of hope, of resistance against oppression. Even though the lyrics were in Korean, every being in that room understood the message. "This is why they try to ban it," whispered one worker, their crystalline form vibrating with emotion. "They know that once we learn to express ourselves, we can't be controlled anymore." News of these underground music movements spread across the galaxy, despite attempts to suppress them. Recordings of Da-hyun's quartet were passed from ship to ship, planet to planet. Nayoung found herself invited to more worlds, teaching more species how to create their own music. Then came the announcement that changed everything. Master composer Hyun Woo-shin, already famous for his work with alien musicians, announced the formation of the first Galactic Orchestra. "We will bring together players from every spacefaring species," he declared. "Our first performance will demonstrate that music isn't just a human art form, it belongs to everyone." The auditions drew thousands. Species that had been at war for generations sat side by side, learning to create harmony together. Hyun-woo worked tirelessly, adapting Earth instruments for different anatomies, incorporating alien musical traditions, and creating a new form of musical notation that could be understood by all. In the weeks before their first concert, something remarkable happened. The orchestra members began to understand each other in ways that transcended their universal translators. Music became their common language, more precise than words, more honest than diplomatic speeches. "Watch this," Hyun-woo said during one rehearsal, gesturing to a section where former enemies now played together. "They're not just making music, they're having a conversation. They're finding their shared truth." The revolution wasn't violent. It didn't need to be. As more beings learned to express themselves through music, the old systems of control began to crumble. How could you oppress someone once you'd heard their soul in their music? Da-hyun's quartet continued to play in underground clubs, but their audience now included beings from all levels of society. Nayoung's teaching methods were adopted by schools across the galaxy, and Hyun-woo's orchestra became a symbol of what was possible when different species learned to work together. One night, in that same dimly lit basement where workers had once gathered in secret, a group of aliens set up their own instruments. They weren't professionals like Da-hyun's quartet. Their music wasn't as polished as the first Galactic Orchestra, but as they played together, creating their own songs about their lives and hopes, they understood what humans had known for millennia. Music wasn't just about making sounds. It was about being heard, being understood, being free. The revolution wasn't fought with weapons. It was played on saxophones and violins, sung in voices both human and alien, expressed in harmonies that bridged the gaps between species. It was a revolution of art and emotion, of creativity and connection. And once it started, there was no stopping it. Just as Da-hyun had predicted when he first added alien harmonics to his jazz, just as Na-young had taught her students, and just as Hyun-woo proved with his orchestra, music wasn't meant to be contained. It was meant to be shared, to grow, to evolve. And in doing so, it changed not just those who played it, but everyone who heard it. The revolution wasn't about overthrowing governments. It was about opening hearts, minds, and whatever passed for souls across the galaxy. And it succeeded one note at a time. The emergency session of the Conservative Alliance filled the ancient chamber with tension. Council member Jin Soo-kwon's voice boomed across the hall, his usually perfect diplomatic composure cracking with frustration. "They're destroying our children," he shouted, displaying holographic images of young aliens dancing to Earth music in secret clubs. In the back of the chamber, In Soo-yang watched quietly, recording everything on his hidden devices. As the galaxy's most notorious music smuggler, he knew these emergency sessions usually led to more business for his network. "Look at this footage," Jin Soo continued, showing scenes from various worlds. Young Centaurians abandoning their crystalline meditation practices to attend concerts. Neptunian youth forming unauthorized bands. Even the Hive Collective reports drones humming Earth melodies during work cycles. The evidence kept mounting. On dozens of worlds, traditional societies were facing unprecedented challenges. Young aliens questioned ancient practices. They sought emotional experiences. They wanted to make music. In Soo smiled to himself. Every new restriction created new opportunities. His network of music runners already spanned 17 systems, using everything from modified cargo ships to tiny data crystals that could hold thousands of songs. "We must act now," Jin Soo declared. "I propose an immediate ban on all Earth frequencies. Any unauthorized possession of human music will result in severe penalties." The vote was quick and decisive. Within hours, the ban spread across conservative territories. Security forces began confiscating musical instruments. Sound detection systems were installed in public spaces. Rewards were offered for information about secret concerts. But they didn't understand what they were fighting against. That same night, In Soo met with his team in a hidden storage facility on the edge of regulated space. "They just made our job more interesting," he told his crew. "A mix of humans and aliens who shared his passion for musical freedom. And more profitable." He held up a tiny crystal, barely larger than his thumbnail. "Our new delivery system. It can hold every symphony ever written on Earth, plus 1,000 years of pop music." The demand was immediate and overwhelming. Wealthy aliens paid fortunes for classical recordings. Workers pooled their credits to buy underground concert tickets. Students traded pop songs like precious gems. In Soo's network adapted quickly. They hid music files in regular data transmissions. They disguised instruments as industrial tools. They created secret venues that could be set up and torn down in minutes. But it wasn't just about profit. In Soo had seen how music changed lives. He remembered the young Nexus girl who heard Mozart for the first time and cried tears her species wasn't supposed to be capable of producing. He thought about the Hive drone who discovered jazz and developed an individual personality, becoming the first of his kind to create original music. The authorities tried everything to stop them. They set up checkpoints. They scanned ships. They monitored communications. But music found a way through every barrier. One of In Soo's most successful innovations was the sound seed, a tiny device that could be planted anywhere and would sprout into a full holographic concert when activated. His team scattered thousands across restricted zones. "You can't stop music," he told a frustrated security officer who finally caught him after a long chase. "It's not just sound. It's not just data. It's something that lives inside everyone who hears it." The officer confiscated his cargo, a shipment of rare Earth instruments bound for an underground music school. But he missed the real delivery. hundreds of sound seeds already planted throughout the city. As rates of emotional awakening continued to rise, the Conservative Alliance tried harsher measures. They introduced mandatory emotional screening. They increased penalties for music possession. They even tried to develop technology to block certain frequencies. But for every measure they took, Insu's network found a counter. When they blocked traditional transmission methods, he switched to quantum-entangled crystals. When they banned physical instruments, he distributed programs that could turn any surface into a musical instrument. The most popular contraband wasn't what anyone expected. While authorities worried about rebellious rock music or emotionally charged classical pieces, the biggest demand was for simple songs. Lullabies, folk tunes, the kind of music parents on Earth had sung to their children for generations. That's what scares them the most, Insu explained to a new recruit. Not the big emotional displays or the cultural changes. It's the simple fact that once people learn to express themselves through music, they can't unlearn it. One night, as Insu prepared another shipment, he received an unexpected message. It was from Jin Su Quan himself, the very council member who had proposed the ban. The message was simple. "My daughter, she wants to learn to sing. Can you help?" Insu looked at his team, then at the stacks of contraband music waiting to be distributed. He thought about all the beings across the galaxy who were discovering their voices for the first time. "Tell him," Insu said to his communications officer, "that music lessons start tonight." He picked up a small crystal containing centuries of Earth's musical heritage. "And tell him to bring his daughter. It's time he learned why you can't ban something that's already inside everyone's heart." The pushback against human music would continue, but Insu knew they had already won. You could ban instruments, block frequencies, and punish performers. But you couldn't stop people from humming. You couldn't prevent them from tapping rhythms. And once they knew music was possible, they would never stop trying to make it. The sunset painted the sky over Seoul Olympic Stadium in shades of purple and gold. Min Ji-cho stood at the highest point of the stadium, looking down at the most extraordinary gathering in human history. Beings from over 1,000 worlds filled the massive space, their different forms creating a living rainbow of colors and textures. "It's time," her assistant said softly, handing her the ceremonial baton. 5 years of work, controversy, and breakthrough had led to this moment. The opening of the first Galactic Music Festival. On the stadium floor, Seijin Han made final adjustments to his universal musical translation matrix, a network of quantum computers and biological sensors that could translate any species' musical expression into forms other species could understand and feel. The system had taken him 3 years to perfect, but now it would allow beings who couldn't even hear the same frequencies to make music together. "All performers are in position," the stage manager reported. Min-ji nodded and began her descent to the conductor's platform. Around her, the stadium hummed with anticipation. Former Nexus warriors sat beside Centaurian crystal singers. Hive drones who had developed individual personalities tuned their instruments next to human musicians. The festival's opening piece had been composed by beings from 12 different species, each contributing their own cultural elements. As Minji raised her baton, Seijin's matrix hummed to life, creating a field that would make the music comprehensible to every being present. The first notes came from Earth instruments, a simple piano melody that spoke of hope. Then, one by one, alien voices and instruments joined in. Crystalline tones from the Centaurians merged with the atmospheric pulses of Neptunian wind singers. Energy beings created waves of pure emotion that the matrix translated into sound. In the audience, a young Nexus child heard the music in his species' natural frequency range and began to cry with joy. Nearby, a hive drone experienced individual emotion for the first time, its neural patterns shifting into unique configurations. The music spread through the stadium like a living thing, touching each being in exactly the way they needed to be touched. Minji conducted with her whole heart, watching as ancient barriers between species melted away. The Matrix transformed each contribution into something all could understand. But it wasn't just translating. It was revealing the common emotions that all sentient beings shared. High above the stadium, news drones broadcast the concert across the galaxy. On thousands of worlds, beings gathered around screens to watch. Even in the conservative territories where human music was still banned, people found ways to tune in. The music built to its first crescendo, and something unprecedented happened. Audience members began to join in spontaneously, adding their voices and sounds to the performance. The Matrix adapted, incorporating these new elements into the growing symphony. Se-Jin watched his creation at work, tears streaming down his face. He had built the Matrix hoping to help different species understand each other's music. But this was beyond anything he had imagined. It wasn't just translation anymore, it was transformation. As the festival continued into the night, more barriers fell. Species that had been at war for generations found themselves making music together. Beings who couldn't physically hear each other found ways to share songs. The Matrix didn't just translate the notes, it translated the emotion, the intention, the soul behind the music. Near midnight, Min-ji prepared for the festival's final. The piece had no written score. It would be a pure improvisation, with every being present invited to contribute. As she raised her hands, the stadium fell silent. Then, slowly, the music began to build. It started with a human voice, singing a simple melody. An alien harmonic joined in, then another and another. The Matrix wove them together, creating something entirely new, not human music, not alien music, but something that belonged to all of them. The symphony grew, layer upon layer of sound and emotion. Beings who had once feared human music now added their own voices to the harmony. Species that had never created music before found their songs emerging. The Matrix translated it all, turning it into a universal language of feeling and connection. As the final notes faded away, Min-ji looked out over the stadium. She saw former enemies embracing, saw young aliens teaching humans their songs, saw the birth of something that would change the galaxy forever. What had started as a feared weapon had become a bridge between worlds. The festival would become an annual event, growing larger each year. Se-Jin's Matrix would be installed in concert halls across the galaxy. Music schools would open on every world, teaching both human and alien musical traditions. But more importantly, beings throughout the galaxy had discovered what humans had known for millennia. That music wasn't just about making sounds. It was about sharing feelings, about connecting hearts and minds and souls. It was about finding harmony in diversity, about turning differences into strength. As the stadium slowly emptied, Min-ji clutched her baton and smiled. The music hadn't just changed the aliens, it had changed humanity too. In teaching others to express their emotions through sound, humans had rediscovered the pure joy of musical creation. The first Galactic Music Festival ended, but its echoes would resonate through space and time forever, a testament to the power of harmony to overcome fear, to bridge differences, and to unite all sentient beings in the universal language of song.